I wanted to share some ideas about our need for sanctuary today. But of course, I wanted to share a joke too. And I was trying to think on the way here what I had in my storehouse for you. And I was remembering a little joke Linda Blaine of Avalon 9, you all know her, posted a couple of days ago. And Joe, help me if I forget about it. What do you get when you cross an atheist with a Jehovah's Witness? Somebody who knocks on your door for no reason? It reminded me of that other old one I like that a lot of people get when you cross an agnostic with an insomniac and a dyslexic. And you get somebody who lays awake at night wondering if there really is a dog. That's an old one. Well, this title, Give Me Shelter, came to mind. I think it's an old Stones song, isn't it? Yeah, but it really doesn't have anything to do with the Rolling Stones. But I wanted to share some ideas this morning about our need for shelter, our need for refuge, for sanctuary. Every day is something we need. Last week I was sharing some ideas. We were talking about how life isn't, it's about improvising so much of the time. There's no guidebook. The unexpected happens all the time that we can't really prepare for or plot our course through. We have to improvise. And one of the biggest resources, for how we find our way through those improvisational times is to draw within, into our sanctuaries, our refuges, to draw guidance, to draw nourishment, to draw support, sustaining energy. And sometimes when we're caught up in the midst of a challenge, that's when we're least likely to go into our closet and shut the door. As the old King James Version of that passage from the Gospels said, take those times in quiet and in prayer to draw from that sustaining refuge within us. We're too busy trying to work things out or figure things out, but that's exactly when we most need sanctuaries in our lives. Sanctuary is a sacred place like a church, a temple, a place of refuge or asylum, a reserved or protected area. There are wildlife sanctuaries, things like that. It kind of draws from that Latin word sanctus, which has to do with sacred, sanctify, consecrate, all forms of that same word. But we have an everyday need for it, and particularly in times of confusion. There must be quiet times when we can cultivate that connection and draw from that connection. If not, it gets, we begin to feel disconnected and not in touch with that source within us. Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you. That's our source, that's our refuge, that's what we need to draw from, and we have to stay in touch with it if we're going to be able to do that in times of trouble. Finding sanctuary. I was reading something from a TED lecture about basic aspects of sanctuaries, and the woman who did it was talking about finding urban sanctuaries, even if you live in a city. But the basic characteristics of a sanctuary are relaxation, a place you can relax; solitude, a place you're alone; security, a place you feel safe; and contemplation, a place that kind of sparks contemplation, reflection. I thought that sounded about right. That's nothing having to do with any particular places then. It's just a place that for you gives you those feelings of safety, solitude, relaxation. You can let everything go. So finding sanctuary, it's kind of an intuitive process, isn't it? How we find it in our lives. It's given to us, given our God-connected nature. Jesus said the kingdom of God is within us. So it's not that any of us are cut off from it. It's a given for each of us. We just need to, we can access it at any time. It's just a matter of how and what ways work best for us. So I think we don't all find sanctuary in the same way. Would you agree? What's a sanctuary for one person might not be a sanctuary for another. So it's kind of important for us to do a little reflecting on that. What's a sanctuary for you? What is that? What are those places or that place in your daily life that you can draw from and rest in and feel nourished by. It's different for all of us. We have a friend in northern Ohio we visit from time to time. He's recovering from going through the grief process. His wife died recently, and he spends a lot of time in his shop. He's got a shop he goes to. He's always rebuilding a car or something. Doesn't sound like much of a sanctuary to me, but it's deeply nourishing for him. Relaxing, safe, familiar place he can go to at any time. Be alone there, work with his hands. I think a lot of us, there's something about working with the hands that's restful, wouldn't you agree? For some could be handwork of any kind, almost. Barbie's not here this morning, but she would swear by quilting, for instance. It's a time-honored way to kind of withdraw into a sanctuary a little bit and rest your mind and spirit. We can find them wherever we are. Whatever our circumstances, if we're alert for it and alert to our need for it. I remember years ago as a young woman, I've shared stories of this time in my life before. I think I moved to New York City after college because I wanted to experience big city life, and I had a couple friends who were living there. And through an employment agency, I found a job at a hectic advertising agency where I answered phones and typed up copy and things like that. And it was very hectic. I was trying to find an apartment, getting a job, finding the way around the city. I adopted the habit, I don't know how it came to be, God guides us in these things, that St. Patrick's Cathedral was a short walk from the ad agency, and I would walk over there on lunch hours and just sit in that sanctuary of that church for a while and look at those gorgeous blue, lots of blue in those stained glass windows in St. Patrick's Cathedral, right in the heart of Manhattan. And there were other people scattered around the room, giving each other plenty of space. That's that solitude thing. In a safe place, you could relax in one of those pews and just gaze at those windows, the sunshine coming through that stained glass. Kind of draw a little refreshment from that just thinking about it. I bet we've all had spots like that, have we not? Hopefully some spots right now, too. You don't have to go anywhere for them, really. Could be a spot in your own backyard. Could be a room in your house that's kind of your sanctuary spot where you have your tea, you've got your inspirational literature there, and your window to look out, or whatever it might be. I think we intuitively, instinctively know our need for these, and we find them. And the more we draw from that, then the better it is for us. And I think we can all look back through our lives at times that in our lives, the sanctuaries we found and how important they were to us. I remember my room as a teenager. You remember your room as a teenager? How important that refuge was? Going through this very confusing time called adolescence. And how important that refuge was, to have a place where you could kind of withdraw in and reflect and write in your diary, how kind of a teenager I was, write in your diary and do some reading, whatever it might be, to have that sanctuary to withdraw in. Very important in those growing up years where you're beginning to think about what kind of an adult you're going to grow into. There's a lot going on. You need to be drawing from that wellspring. You need a sanctuary. I think we can look back over our lives and kind of track the sanctuaries, track the history of the sanctuaries in our lives. I stumbled on a TED Talk by an architect. Her name is Katie Creeklow, and it was about urban sanctuary. And about her ability, with her love of architecture and buildings and so on, it makes sense that she gravitates to those kind of sanctuary spots. But she has this ability to find little niches and corridors and back alleys and gardens and parks and little bits of cities and so on, of the city. Her city is Salem, Oregon. That's where she's from. That for her create a feeling of sanctuary, of solitude, of relaxation, of security. In the heart of the city, she still finds them. And she kind of did a whole map of her hometown, of Salem, Oregon, marking all the sanctuaries that were special to her, kind of a unique and personal map of her sanctuaries of Salem. I thought thought that was kind of a fascinating idea. And she took photos of these places and kind of created a presentation about it to inspire others to maybe create your own map, explore where you live, and find the sanctuaries in it. Find the sanctuaries in it. It made me think of when I was growing up. I grew up in a small town. I was so fortunate to be able to have a lot of freedom to roam around a small town, walking to and from school, spending a lot of time walking around, the little uptown area up in northern Ohio. And it made me think of kind of the map I knew of my hometown growing up, which was different from adult maps. The map that we explored after school, in middle school or high school. There was the lunch counter we went to get, whatever, brownies or Jell-O or something something nourishing, I'm sure, after school. And and then the route we took home through High C Park, the creek beds. My best friend and I like to explore in the park. That people would be going by on the road above, but we were down in the creek beds looking for crawdaddies and things like that, wading around. And the reservoir that we would go out to, we'd go out with friends sometimes, or I would go out sometimes just alone to look at the water and see the trees. And there were paths that you could go through the woods there. Sanctuaries I gravitated to in those years, places where you could tap into that wellspring, that guidance that nourished deeply. It could be any place. Right where we live, if we're looking for it and aware of our need for it, and get our noses away from the grindstone enough to realize I really need to open to deeper wisdom and create some space for that to happen. I can't be just kind of plotting and planning and trying to make it work moment by moment. I need to create some space. And we kind of gravitate to them. There's an intuitive process about that. Made me think of, you've heard of thin places in Celtic wisdom. There's a Gaelic word for that, but in Celtic tradition they talk about thin places, which is places where the veil between us and something deeper seems very thin. Like we are in touch with spirit in some way. Like maybe in St. Patrick's Cathedral, kind of a thin place there. Like maybe, down in that creek bed in the park, when I was a kid. Maybe in mid-nature, there are thin places. And that's really could be anywhere. It's our awareness that creates the thin place, I think. It isn't the particulars of the place. That architect, Katie, she found thin places in the middle of the city. I think we can find them almost anywhere. And I think it's, sometimes it's maybe children lead the way a little bit on that. They're better in some ways about staying open to that and finding those sacred places, exploring them and giving themselves permission to explore them. They don't have to be working and doing all the time. They can just create some space to go out and play, right? How many of you went out to play this week? Good job, Jean. Excellent. I love it. We don't give ourselves permission enough, everything's got to be structured. We've got to be working all the time. And that's important to have times to just explore, find those thin places that nourish us. It reminded me of the wonderful, probably my favorite children's book, The Secret Garden. And if you read The Secret Garden, yeah, it's a wonderful book, about an orphan girl, troubled, angry orphan girl, and a sick little boy, and they find this hidden garden all overgrown on their property, and they begin on the sly, secretly, to explore that garden, to get in there and to tend it, and to explore it, and to spend time in it. And as things come back to life, and the flower beds and everything, they come back to life in some way, right? They too are rejuvenated and replenished. That's our need for, and it was important to that it was solitude, it was a safe place, it was kind of secret, it was their place. We need places like that. We need sanctuaries every day. They can be redemptive for us. They can be salvational. Exploring the places where we're planted, finding our power spots, that's another way of talking about it, finding those places, those niches and sacred places that we can draw from. And it really doesn't matter where. We can find him anywhere, at any time in our lives. I'm always amazed when I'm thinking about an idea for Sunday, for my Sunday message. Invariably, things pop out at me in my reading or things people say to me. And I stumbled on an interview with Kelsey Grammer. Remember Kelsey Grammer? And did that delightful show, Frasier. We still catch reruns of that sometimes. Kelsey Grammer, and it was a kind of interview about his life, and he had some challenges as a young man. His father was murdered when he was a teenager. He was like 15 years old. His grandfather had died about the same time. It was a loss. There was a lot of loss in his life. But he shared this story in this interview that when he was 15, his father had just died, had just been murdered, and he is in his room. And he called it his refuge. He's in his room. And this is where he is in his life. And he hears this phrase in his head. And I'd never heard it before, and he had never heard it before. But the phrase came to him, stagger onward, rejoicing. Stagger onward, rejoicing. Now that's a strange phrase to pop into the head of a 15-year-old boy in his room. It grabbed his attention, and it's something that became an anchor for him. Stagger onward, rejoicing. It means keep going, even in times of great trouble. Rejoice in that you're alive. You know, I don't know what it all meant for him, but he hung on to it like an anchor. And it was like 11 years later, he stumbled on the source of where that came from, and it was in a poem by W.H. Auden called Atlantis. Stagger onward, rejoicing. He had not read that poem. Now, how do you explain that? I explain that as when we have times in our sanctuaries where we are deeply in touch with that power and presence in us, all kinds of wisdom becomes available to us, things that we don't expect. Carl Jung might talk about that as the collective unconscious. We might talk about it as divine mind. We're more deeply connected, and there's more wisdom available to us than we realize that we can tap into if we give ourselves moments in our sanctuaries with God and connect up with that. Stagger onward, rejoicing. Kelsey Grammer said that he named his first child Auden when reflecting on that experience. It sustained him in a way. It's been an anchor for him throughout his life, that there's a wisdom available to us, a comfort, a presence that responds to our deep needs for comfort and guidance that will come to us. Will come to us in times of trouble. And our role is just to create space so we can receive it. Enter our sanctuaries, our refuges. So explore where we are for our own thin places and use them. The second thing about that is remember it's mostly an inside job. Our homes can be sanctuaries or not. Have you ever been in a home that felt like a sanctuary? It just feels warm, feels like a place that's nourishing. And other homes, not so much. Not so much. It's mostly an inside job. It's our own attitudes, our own intentions. How do we want our homes to be? Do we want it to be a sanctuary? Do we want it to be a place of peace, of support, of loving kindness? That's an intention we can form and stick with. It can be a place of renewal, of peace. And the third point I was thinking about with it is that our communities can and should be sanctuaries too. And that's something we can cultivate with our attitudes and intentions as well. The same intentionality will create a sanctuary of our church, for instance, and I hope all churches are that kind of sanctuary where we have an intention of peace and loving kindness for all who enter our doors, for all who are here. Any kind of community, our neighborhoods can be that way, our companies, our organizations can be that way. We can create sanctuaries. I think there are some enlightened companies who do that for their employees, aren't there? They've got like quiet rooms, little sanctuary places. I think we need them badly throughout our lives in all kinds of places. The last time we traveled going through airports, I thought, we need some quiet oases in airports, don't we? They're so hectic and noisy and music playing everywhere. It's really, and I think they do have chapels sometimes in them, but they're not easy to find. We need lots of oases in our public spaces. And any place, any neighborhood, any community can become a sanctuary if we have that intention. I was inspired by a lovely story, one of the stories on CBS Sunday Morning in the past month or so, on a neighborhood in Newton, Massachusetts, I think the town was. And there was in this neighborhood, there was a couple with a little deaf child. She was a 2-year-old named Samantha. Samantha Savitz, they called her Sam, and she was deaf, and she was very good at sign language. And she was very, very gregarious, and she really loved to talk to everybody. But the only people who learned sign were her parents, which was lovely they did. But all the neighbors, you know, they didn't know how to talk to her. They didn't know how to communicate with her, so she felt excluded a lot. You know, she wasn't able to engage with the neighbors in the community the way she'd like to, because she was really quite a friendly and gregarious little girl. So that was frustrating. But one neighbor got the bright idea that I'd be happy to learn sign language. I bet some of the other neighbors would too. Why don't we learn sign language? And you know, they began to talk about it in the neighborhood. There was interest in the idea, and so they brought in an instructor for some immersion sign language class that they held in one of their homes. And there's video clips about it. All the neighbors coming together in the evening to learn American Sign Language, so they could communicate with this little 2-year-old girl. And at the end of class, every day, Sam comes out and they all practice their talking with her, and she's so excited, and they're saying hi, and don't you look pretty, or you know, whatever else they were saying to her, communicating with her. And you know, the sign language instructor said, I mean, this is just wonderful. I mean, it's going to make her such a happier, better adjusted child. And it's so good for the neighbors too. Creates this whole feeling of, this is a community of loving kindness. This is a community of mutual support. This is a community of peace. This is a community that stands together. What a beautiful thing that is, to create your whole community. May it become a sanctuary for yourself, for others in it. Through this loving infusion, this intention that this be a loving place, that this be a sanctuary for all of us. We can all create that in our lives, in our personal lives, and in our community lives, with intention and with awareness, with a willingness to seek out those sanctuaries that work for us, that are sacred places for us, use them often, draw from that wellspring often. Emily Cady called it the secret place of the Most High. We've all got it, that place in us where we're God connected, and those places in our lives where we feel that connection most deeply. That's what we need to kind of be on the alert for. What works for you? Our God connection is a given. We're all God-connected beings, but we may not be feeling that all the time. That's where our sanctuaries come in. We need those spaces and moments in our days where we can draw from that, withdraw, rest in that, and allow ourselves to be replenished. And it's amazing what might come to us, like that phrase from a poem that leaped into Kelsey Grammer's mind. I suspect in this very room there have been some of us who, in times of quiet or prayer or contemplation or solitude, something has come to us that became a bit of an anchor, you know, something steadying, some words of guidance rose up in our minds. We are God-connected beings, and this wellspring that we can draw from is deep. It's deeper than we realize, and it's there for all of us if we just set that intention and allow ourselves to give a rest a little bit every day, to find those spots and spaces. Pour a cup of tea, sit on the porch, look out at the trees, whatever it is that makes you feel in touch with that sanctuary within you. I rest in the sanctuary of my spirit, and God refreshes me. Let me say that again. We can do it together if you like. I rest in the sanctuary of my spirit, and God refreshes me. Yeah. Let's take that into prayer for a moment. As we close our eyes, we take that idea deep within. And affirm our intention, moment by moment, day by day, whenever we have needed it, to rest in that sanctuary, that place in us where we know we are connected with Source, with the love, the wisdom, the peace of God. And we let ourselves be replenished and nourished. No forcing, no struggle or strain. We just let ourselves draw from that deep wellspring within. And God rests us. How grateful we are for the life of God within us. So it is. Amen.